As the king and queen leave the thrones and head for the exit of Westminster Abbey of the coronation ceremony, you'll see that everyone bows and curtsies to the king, and no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes.
For years, the British royal family has managed to present a united front during public appearances, even when speculation about tensions behind palace walls continued to circulate. But every so often, reports emerge that raise new questions about how relationships inside the monarchy really function. One recent story has focused on an alleged confrontation involving King Charles III, Queen Camilla, and Princess Anne, with claims that a disagreement over royal duties and protocol escalated in front of palace staff. While many details remain part of unverified royal commentary rather than officially confirmed palace accounts, the discussion has once again highlighted the unique balance of authority, tradition, and personal relationships that defines life inside the royal household. According to the account, the incident centered on preparations for an upcoming official engagement. Within the monarchy, events of this kind involve far more than simply deciding who attends. Every entrance, every seating arrangement, every speaking role, and every movement follows carefully established protocol developed over generations. These procedures are designed to ensure consistency and preserve the dignity of the institution, leaving little room for personal interpretation. Even what appears to outsiders as a minor scheduling adjustment can carry symbolic weight for those responsible for maintaining royal tradition. As preparations moved forward, Princess Anne reportedly questioned a last-minute alteration to the event plan. Those familiar with Anne's public reputation know she has long been regarded as one of the hardest-working members of the royal family. Throughout decades of service, she has built a reputation for being direct, practical, and deeply committed to duty rather than ceremony. When she raises concerns, palace staff are said to pay close attention, not because of rank alone, but because of the respect she has earned through years of consistent public service. The reported adjustment was not simply about changing a timetable. It involved the sequence of responsibilities and the established order that governs official appearances. Anne is said to have calmly asked why the modification had been introduced without following the normal review process. Witnesses described her approach as measured rather than confrontational. She reportedly spoke without raising her voice, presenting the issue as one of procedure instead of personality. That quiet confidence, according to the account, created an uncomfortable atmosphere inside the room. Palace aides reportedly stopped what they were doing as the discussion unfolded. Everyone present understood that disagreements involving senior members of the royal family are exceptionally rare, particularly when they concern official business. The silence itself became noticeable as staff waited to see how the conversation would develop. The situation allegedly became more tense when Queen Camilla interpreted Anne's remarks as something more personal than a routine procedural question. Rather than hearing a technical concern about protocol, she reportedly viewed the comments as an indirect challenge to her authority within the household. Observers have often noted that Camilla's journey to becoming queen was unlike that of any recent royal consort. Years of public scrutiny, criticism, and gradual acceptance have meant that every aspect of her public role continues to attract unusual attention. Against that background, even a seemingly minor disagreement could understandably carry greater emotional weight. Those present reportedly noticed the contrast between the two women. Anne remained composed, speaking only when necessary and avoiding unnecessary emotion. Camilla, however, appeared increasingly frustrated as the exchange continued. What began as a discussion about planning gradually evolved into something reflecting deeper questions about influence, responsibility, and respect inside the institution. King Charles was also present throughout the meeting. According to the account, he initially observed the discussion without interrupting, perhaps expecting the disagreement to resolve itself through normal conversation. As monarch, Charles carries the difficult responsibility of balancing his role as head of the institution with his personal relationships as husband and brother. In moments where family dynamics overlapped with official duties, those responsibilities can become especially difficult to separate. The atmosphere reportedly changed when the discussion moved beyond protocol and into personal accusations. Staff members who had remained in the room suddenly found themselves witnessing what was no longer simply a professional disagreement. The focus shifted from event planning to questions of loyalty, authority, and perceived respect within the royal household. Several aides reportedly avoided eye contact, recognizing that the situation had become far more serious than anyone had anticipated only minutes earlier. For Charles, the significance of the moment extended well beyond the individuals involved. Palace staff are expected to see stability, discipline, and confidence from senior royals. Any visible breakdown of that unity risks undermining the carefully maintained image of order upon which the monarchy depends. According to the account, Charles appeared increasingly concerned not only about the disagreement itself, but also about the impression it was leaving on those who serve the crown every day. As the room fell silent, it reportedly became clear that what had started as a routine planning discussion had exposed deeper tensions that had been developing beneath the surface for some time. Questions about protocol had evolved into questions about influence, trust, and the delicate balance of authority within one of the world's most closely watched institutions. By the time the exchange ended, everyone present reportedly understood that the consequences would extend far beyond a single meeting, regardless of how the matter was eventually resolved. Although the reported confrontation appeared to erupt in a single meeting, people familiar with royal operations have long pointed out that disagreements inside the palace rarely develop overnight. They usually build gradually through countless conversations, differing priorities, and contrasting approaches to royal life. In this case, the alleged tension between Queen Camilla and Princess Anne was said to have been growing quietly during preparations for several important state occasions, where questions of protocol became increasingly sensitive. Princess Anne has spent decades earning a reputation as one of the monarchy's most dependable working royals. Year after year, she has consistently ranked among the busiest members of the family in terms of official engagements. Palace employees have often described her as someone who values precision above popularity. She is known for insisting that established procedures exist for a reason and should not be altered simply because circumstances become inconvenient. That philosophy has shaped much of her public service throughout her life. Camilla's position within the royal family has followed a very different path. Unlike Anne, who was born into royal life, Camilla entered the institution after years of intense public attention surrounding her relationship with Charles. Since becoming queen, she has worked steadily to establish her own role alongside the king, while gradually earning broader acceptance from both the public and those working within the royal household. That history makes questions surrounding authority particularly significant whenever discussions involve ceremonial responsibilities. According to the account, an earlier planning session had already exposed differences between the two women. Preparations were underway for a formal state reception, one of the monarchy's most carefully organized public events. Such occasions involve detailed planning weeks in advance, with officials reviewing everything from guest arrivals to seating plans and processional order. During those discussions, Anne reportedly noticed changes affecting the traditional sequence of participants and immediately questioned whether they complied with long-established protocol. Rather than making an emotional argument, Anne allegedly focused entirely on procedure. She reviewed the documents, identified the sections that differed from previous practice, and calmly suggested that the original order should be restored. Palace officials responsible for ceremonial planning reportedly understood the implications immediately. Maintaining protocol is viewed not simply as preserving tradition, but as protecting the institution from confusion or accusations of favoritism. What made the situation particularly uncomfortable, according to those familiar with the account, was how quickly staff appeared to respond to Anne's observations. Without prolonged debate, several officials reportedly accepted her interpretation and began discussing revisions. To Camilla, that response may have suggested that Anne's judgment carried greater influence within the working household, regardless of official titles. Whether or not that perception reflected reality, it reportedly left a lasting impression. The story also claims that King Charles later expressed appreciation for Anne's attention to detail after the meeting had concluded. While no official record confirming such a conversation has ever been released publicly, the account suggests that word of the king's gratitude eventually circulated among members of the household. If accurate, that development may have unintentionally deepened existing sensitivities, reinforcing the impression that Anne's views had received the king's support. From that point onward, later discussions reportedly carried an entirely different atmosphere. Routine conversations about scheduling or ceremonial order no longer felt routine. Every correction, every suggestion, and every procedural question risked being interpreted through the lens of previous disagreements. Instead of focusing solely on administrative details, participants reportedly became increasingly aware of the underlying personal dynamics influencing the conversations. By the time preparations began for the next major engagement, palace staff allegedly sensed the growing tension before a single word had been spoken. Meetings became noticeably quieter, officials limited unnecessary comments and concentrated strictly on their assigned responsibilities. Those who had worked inside royal households for years understood how quickly internal disagreements could affect morale, particularly when they involved the most senior members of the monarchy. According to the account, the decisive meeting began with what appeared to be another straightforward question from Princess Anne regarding changes to an internal household instruction. Once again, her tone was described as calm and professional. She simply asked why the revised direction had not followed the usual consultation process before being circulated to staff responsible for implementing it. This time, however, the response was dramatically different. Rather than allowing the discussion to remain procedural, Camilla reportedly answered immediately, interpreting Anne's question as another attempt to undermine her standing. What followed, according to the account, transformed an administrative conversation into an intensely personal exchange that everyone present would remember long after the meeting had concluded. By then, the issue was no longer about schedules or ceremony. It had become a dispute over trust, authority, and the difficult challenge of maintaining unity within one of the world's most scrutinized families. The atmosphere reportedly shifted the moment the discussion moved away from paperwork and became personal. Until then, everyone in the room had expected another routine exchange over ceremonial planning, but according to the account, Queen Camilla responded before King Charles had an opportunity to bring the conversation back to procedure. Staff members who had worked around the royal family for years immediately sensed that the meeting was heading in an unexpected direction. Camilla reportedly questioned whether Anne's repeated interventions were truly about protocol or whether they reflected a broader unwillingness to accept her position within the monarchy. It was a deeply personal accusation, especially considering the years Camilla had spent adapting to royal life under constant public scrutiny. Becoming queen did not erase the complicated history that surrounded her relationship with Charles, and despite carrying the title, she has continued to face comparisons with other senior members of the royal family. According to the account, those long-standing frustrations surfaced during the exchange. Princess Anne, however, reportedly refused to match the emotional tone. Those who have followed her royal career know she has rarely engaged in public displays of frustration, even during difficult periods for the monarchy. Her reputation has been built on consistency rather than confrontation. According to the report, she listened without interruption before calmly responding that her concern had always been the same, ensuring that royal duties followed established procedure and protected the institution above individual preference. That answer reportedly changed the mood inside the room. Instead of escalating into a heated argument, Anne's measured response highlighted the contrast between the two approaches. Several aides are said to have remained completely silent, avoiding even the smallest movement. No one wanted to appear as though they were taking sides during a disagreement involving some of the most senior figures in the royal family. King Charles had reportedly remained seated throughout much of the exchange, watching the discussion unfold with growing concern. As sovereign, he occupies a unique position within the monarchy. Every disagreement among senior royals eventually reaches his responsibility, because preserving unity is not only a personal priority, but also a constitutional necessity. According to the account, Charles appeared increasingly aware that the conversation had crossed a line from internal administration into something capable of affecting confidence within the household itself. The report claims that Camilla then suggested Anne had spent years using protocol as a shield to challenge decisions without appearing openly confrontational. It was a remark that reportedly surprised many of those present. Rather than criticizing a specific decision, it questioned Anne's entire approach to royal service. For someone whose public image has long been associated with discipline and dedication, the accusation carried considerable weight. Anne reportedly paused before answering. Witnesses described the silence as almost more significant than the words that followed. When she eventually responded, she is said to have remarked that duty, not personality, had always been the foundation that allowed the monarchy to endure through periods of uncertainty. The statement was brief, but according to the account, it immediately shifted the focus back to the institution itself rather than the individuals involved. That moment reportedly proved decisive for King Charles. The discussion was no longer confined to differences of opinion between his wife and his sister. Palace staff had now witnessed a direct conflict involving questions of authority, loyalty, and the principles that guide royal service. According to the report, Charles stood abruptly, bringing the conversation to an immediate halt before instructing everyone except Anne and Camilla to leave the room. The aides reportedly exited without speaking, understanding that what remained was no longer ordinary palace business. For Charles, allowing the disagreement to continue in front of employees risked damaging the disciplined image the monarchy depends upon. Whatever private feelings existed between family members, they could not be allowed to undermine confidence inside the institution responsible for supporting the crown. Once the room had emptied, the discussion reportedly became calmer, though no less significant. Charles is said to have emphasized that disagreements over ceremonial arrangements should never become personal attacks. Maintaining respect among senior members of the royal family, he reportedly argued, was essential not only for family relationships, but also for preserving public confidence in the monarchy itself. According to the account, Charles later withdrew to his private study, where officials prepared an internal summary describing what had occurred during the meeting. Such records are intended to document significant events affecting palace operations, rather than assign blame. Nevertheless, the reported existence of a written account reflected how seriously the situation was being treated. By the end of the day, what had begun as a discussion over royal protocol had reportedly become one of the most sensitive internal issues facing the household, forcing the king to weigh his responsibilities as both a husband and the head of the institution he had pledged to protect. Following the reported confrontation, attention reportedly shifted from the argument itself to the decisions King Charles would make in its aftermath. Within the royal household, visible disagreements between senior royals are unusual enough, but when they occur in front of staff, they raise broader questions about leadership, discipline, and institutional stability. According to the account, Charles understood that whatever action he took next would be interpreted not simply as a husband's response or a brother's opinion, but as the decision of the monarch. The report claims that an internal summary of the incident was prepared for senior palace officials, outlining what had taken place during the meeting. Such documentation is intended to ensure that those responsible for managing royal operations have an accurate record whenever significant internal matters arise. Although the contents of any such document have never been officially confirmed by Buckingham Palace, the account suggests that it described the sequence of events without dramatic language, focusing instead on who was present, how the discussion unfolded, and the moment the king intervened. According to the report, Princess Anne made no effort to seek sympathy or request disciplinary action. Those familiar with her public record have often noted that she rarely comments on internal royal matters, preferring to continue her official work without engaging in public disputes. The account portrays her reaction in a similar way, suggesting that she remained focused on carrying out her responsibilities rather than extending the disagreement beyond the meeting itself. King Charles, however, reportedly faced a far more complicated position. Throughout his reign, he has emphasized the importance of presenting a modern yet stable monarchy, capable of maintaining public confidence during periods of change. Any perception that disagreements among senior royals were disrupting official business would run counter to that objective. According to the account, Charles therefore viewed the issue as one involving institutional discipline rather than personal loyalty. The report further claims that one immediate consequence involved preparations for the forthcoming ceremonial engagement. Responsibility for overseeing final protocol arrangements was reportedly assigned to Princess Anne, whose long experience with royal procedure made her, in the king's view, the most appropriate person to ensure that every detail followed established practice. If accurate, that decision represented more than a simple administrative adjustment. Within the structure of the royal household, responsibility for ceremonial planning reflects a high level of confidence in an individual's judgment and experience. For Queen Camilla, according to the account, the decision was difficult to accept. The report suggests that she learned of the revised arrangements through palace aides after updated planning documents had already been circulated. Rather than containing criticism or disciplinary language, the revised paperwork simply reflected the new chain of responsibility. It was the absence of explanation, the account claims, that made the change feel particularly significant. Nothing needed to be stated directly. The alteration itself conveyed the king's decision. The story goes on to describe a private conversation between Charles and Camilla after the changes had been made. According to the account, Camilla questioned why Anne's position had effectively been strengthened, while her own role had been reduced. Charles reportedly responded by emphasizing that his responsibility extended beyond personal relationships. His primary obligation, the account claims, was to protect the integrity of the institution whenever internal disagreements threatened to overshadow official duties. Whether every detail unfolded exactly as described remains impossible to verify through official palace sources. Buckingham Palace traditionally does not comment on private family discussions or alleged internal disagreements, and many stories involving royal relationships rely heavily on unnamed sources or later accounts that cannot be independently confirmed. Nevertheless, the narrative has attracted widespread attention because it reflects long-standing public interest in how senior members of the royal family navigate both personal relationships and constitutional responsibilities. In the weeks that followed, public attention naturally focused on official appearances rather than private conversations. Princess Anne continued carrying out her busy schedule of engagements with the same composed approach for which she has become widely respected over decades of service. King Charles also maintained his program of constitutional duties, continuing to represent the crown both at home and abroad. Queen Camilla likewise remained active in her charitable work and public engagements, appearing alongside the king at numerous official events despite ongoing media speculation surrounding the reported incident. Ultimately, whether viewed as an accurate account or as one of many stories that circulate around the royal family, the episode illustrates why palace protocol exists in the first place. Procedures, traditions, and carefully defined responsibilities are designed not merely to preserve ceremony, but to minimize the influence of personal disagreements on the functioning of the monarchy. The institution has endured generations of political change, public scrutiny, and family challenges because its long-term stability has consistently depended on placing duty ahead of individual emotion. That principle continues to shape every official role within the royal family, regardless of title or personal circumstance, and remains one of the defining characteristics of the modern British monarchy.